Hello, and welcome to The Right to Read. I'm Christian Zagal. I'm here with my co-host, Vanessa Treadwell. Today we'll be discussing the recent surge of book bans in the United States during 2021 through 2022. An unprecedented number of book bans were intact at schools and libraries across the United States and affected over 5,000 schools and 4 million students. These book bans have taken away the books that relate to individuals' experiences and their lives, and hurts the community that the schools and libraries serve. We hope that by discussing this topic, listeners will understand the importance of diverse literature and join in the fight against censorship and support the freedom to read. The American Library Association is a non-profit organization based in the United States that promotes libraries and library education internationally. This 150-year-old organization ensures access to information for 50,000 members worldwide. They also offer space where equality, diversity, and inclusion can intersect with social justice and intellectual freedom. The ALA sponsors Book Ban Week, an event where literature and libraries communities raise awareness about this challenge books and the First Amendment freedom. Miss Lessa Kananiapua Halaya Lozada is the president of the American Library Association, chair of the executive board, and chair of the council. She shares with us about the rapid escalation of book bans and what the ALA is doing to fight for the freedom to read.
What we're facing right now is the highest number of book challenges that we have ever tracked in the 20-year history of our Office for Intellectual Freedom. So in 2021, we tracked 729 challenges to library, school, and university materials, which resulted in more than 1,597 individual book challenges or removals. This year alone, from January to August of 2022, we've tracked 681 challenges, which has resulted in 1,651 individual book challenges or removals. So we have already surpassed the number from last year. And where that intersection comes in with social justice is that the books that are being banned at the highest rates typically feature LGBTQ+ authors and or main characters or information about that community, or they are also targeting books by and about Brown and Indigenous people of color, as well as the histories that we share within those communities.
The United States is more multiracial and ethnically diverse than previous generations. Federal statistics show that since 2014, children of color have comprised nearly 55% of the total public school K-12 student body and mirror the rapidly changing demographics of the country. There have been increased efforts to promote racial and ethnic inclusion, social equality, and offer an understanding of the contributions of all people who have shaped our country's history. Intellectual and social movements like critical race theory address how the social concepts of race and ethnicity have embedded racism in laws, institutions, the media, and social political movements in America. Yet efforts to promote an understanding have been met with partisan politics and a culture war. Sexuality, sexual preference, and gender are also topics more openly discussed and accepted now. Children and young adults naturally experience human sexual development. They have a right to learn about healthy sexuality, how to create boundaries, and gain an understanding and respect of the different forms of relationships that exist in the world they live in. For example, the 22 Gallup poll reports that 1 in 5 individuals who are Generation Z and 1 in 10 millennials now identify as LGBTQ. Education serves a primary role in developing an understanding and respect for the diversity of America. Yet, the current book bans and resulting legislation are primarily based on conservative ideals of Americanism, Christianity, and heterosexuality, and do not reflect the country's racial or social makeup.
I think that we are seeing an environment that is becoming increasingly politicized. And I think that, because libraries are that place, for inclusion, that we become targets for that. I think that we are seen as kind of easy targets for folks to promote their own political agendas and for folks to promote their own ideologies and to use us to create the worlds that they think that they want.
One of the biggest argument advocates have to support book bans is that they want to protect our children from ideals or values that are not in alignment with their family morals and values. That it should be up to parents to decide what books their children can access, and that they are trying to protect children from the content they are not ready to confront.
Every family absolutely has the right to determine what is right for their family. to read and participate in, but what they don't have the right to is to make that choice for other people's families. And so what the library is there to do is to be able to be the space so that all families can see themselves and have access to that information. And one of the arguments also is that access to books or access to these ideas will inherently change the family structure. It'll inherently change the values that they share. But what really we are encouraging and what we need folks to understand is that just having access to idea doesn't automatically change your mind about anything. I think that we have seen that in the age of misinformation that we are living in, that it takes so much more to change ideologies and to change perspectives, but also that, like I said, children's minds aren't automatically changed, but one of the repercussions is also that children also won't have an understanding of all of the different lives that are being lived in the world, and that just because they don't believe in something doesn't mean that they can't respect the humanity of another person that they may come across that lives their life in a different way or comes from a different background and has had different life experiences.
PEN America is a national nonprofit group that advocates for free expression in literature, and they say that there are 4 major self-described conservative parents' rights organizations that have 300 or more local or regional chapters. These are the groups that are most active in promoting book bans. These national groups include Moms for Liberty, U.S. Parents Involved in Education, No Left Turn in Education, and Parents' Rights in Education. PEN estimates that 73% of these groups formed in 2021 have been instrumental in at least 50% of the book bans being enacted across the country during the 2021-2022 school year. The groups use a playbook of strategies, including disseminating lists of books they believe should be banned in their communities and mobilizing members to converge on school board meetings to argue on whether various books are appropriate for school children and young adults. They have demanded libraries adhere to new rating systems and use inflammatory language to imply that grooming and pornography are occurring within the books. There have also been numerous reports of harassment and intimidation by these group members.
So at the beginning of 2022, the American Library Association conducted a bipartisan poll that found that 71% of voters across party lines were opposed to efforts to remove books from public libraries. And it was including majorities of voters, like I said, across party lines. So we're talking about, just over 25% of voters are actually in favor of this type of behavior. So we're really looking at a small minority of individuals that are trying to silence diverse voices as well as diverse ideas and stop access to information. Typically, the book bans that we're seeing are organized efforts by groups that are just providing lists of materials to challenge or providing their own kind of slant on things. And so some of the challenges that are coming, the individuals have never even actually read the book that they are challenging or attended the program that they're challenging. And one of the interesting things, and interesting in the awful sense that we've seen over the last 18 months or so, is that it used to be a one-to-one challenge. So it would be one challenge for one book or one challenge for one program. And now what we're seeing is one challenge now hosts 2, 3, sometimes over 100 different titles of books that may not even be in the library.
According to John Skolnick, who wrote the article, "What's Behind the Right-Wing Book Ban Frenzy? Big Money and Long-Term Plan." Organizers on the front lines of the parental right movements have connections to the right-wing Republican politics and donors that are highly skilled at astroturfing local conflicts on the national scale. These advocates provide playbooks on the process to get book bans, draft model laws, lobby legislators, provide legal support, and recruit parents and community activists. A slide for one of these events claimed that globalism, utopians, socialists, totalitarians, and the UN are using public schools to undermine freedom and Christianity. Additional support and financial resources are also being sponsored by organizations like the Heritage Foundation, an American influential think tank, Washington, D.C., known for the controversial activism.
Book bans are just the beginning. Numerous states have passed or are in process of passing legislation to support a wider censorship effort. Largely, it is Republican states that have instituted the largest number of book bans and also passed the most restrictive legislation and policies. These restrictions affect how public school teachers can talk about race, gender, and sexuality. Teachers and school staff can expect to experience harsh penalties if they don't adhere.
Yeah, I think that there are lots of different bills and legislation that are popping up, like Missouri is one. Oklahoma also has a law on the books that does not allow schools to put forth, kind of objectionable materials. One of the Oklahoma state librarians gave the QR code to Brooklyn Public Library to her students because she couldn't provide access to what some of us would consider formative books in high school.
Efforts to expand the book bans have also begun to spread out to public libraries and could affect readers of all ages. In Missouri, Secretary of State Jay Ashcroft, a likely candidate for the Republican governor in 2024, is leading the effort to ban certain books in his state public libraries. Mr. Ashcroft submits a proposal to rule change that establish a certificate requirement for libraries to receive state fund. Under the plan, they will need to adopt policies to determine what material is appropriate for certain ages. He claims the measures are to protect minors from what he calls non-age appropriate materials. And state money will not be used to purchase or acquire inappropriate materials that appeal to the prurient interests of a minor. If this legislation goes through, it has the potential to limit what readers of all ages have access to.
This legislation comes after school librarians across Missouri were required to pull books from the shelves or face the potential of criminal charges under a new state law banning explicit sexual material that passed in August of 2022. The law defines explicit sexual material as any visual depiction of sex acts or genitalia, with some exceptions for artistic or scientific significance. It applies to any type of image, including pictorial, three-dimensional, or visual depictions, and includes photography, film, video, picture, or computer-generated images. It also includes images in books or magazines in a library and images on internet sites that students are directed to. Violations of the law by school employees who provide such materials to students are considered a Class A misdemeanor and carry a maximum penalty of 1 year in jail and a fine of $2,000.
And so the concerns are when we are talking about funding, especially, is that if you're defunding libraries, you're not only now silencing voices, you're silencing ideas, you're also taking away a third community space that is vital and essential to the community. It is one of the only third spaces. You have home, you have work/school, and then you have the library as a free space to be able to come together as a community and to be able to share with one another and build the bonds that are essential, I think, to having a democratic society and to having a full and healthy society, that one in which all of your community members can feel seen.
Many states are banning books about race because they say they are teaching students about critical race theory. The theory acknowledges that racial disparities exist. White privilege have persisted in the U.S. history and has been reinforced by U.S. laws and institutions. Although what he taught at colleges and law school levels, suppressing books about racial-based historical bent schools cannot change the past, and he impels collective efforts to reconcile and move forward and not repeat racist ideological thinking in the future.
Tennessee is just one example among many states that illustrates how book bans and legislation are being implemented, not based on historical accuracy, but personal preference. A group of parents led by a local chapter of Moms for Liberty attempted to get dozens of books removed, including a picture book called Ruby Bridges Goes to School, written by and about Ruby Bridges. Ruby Bridges was the first Black child to attend an all-white elementary school in 1960 in New Orleans after desegregation. Parents complained that this book mentions a large crowd of angry white people who didn't want Black children in a white school, and that the book doesn't offer redemption at the end.
Additionally, the group objected to educators using words like injustice, unequal, inequality, protest, march, and segregation in their grammar lessons. Other books that have historical portraits and are being banned across the United States, including Martin Luther King Jr. and the March to Washington, because there were photographs of political violence. Another book is Arthur Spiegelman Pulitzer Prize-winning graphic novel Mouse, where the author interviews his father about his experience as a Polish Jew and a Holocaust survivor. Parents groups want this book removed, saying that the memoir was inappropriate for students. These groups have put librarians at the forefront of what is being seen as a political fight.
And so the repercussions of this also are on very tangible levels, where our library workers are afraid of being fined. They are afraid of losing their jobs. They are afraid of being jailed, and they don't know what is going to happen because these laws also are not clear on what materials are and are not okay. And the ones that are very clear, we don't agree with, right? So it's a very difficult and challenging time for library workers right now. And at the American Library Association, we're trying to provide as much support as we can to folks who are facing these challenges on the front line.
Gag orders are state legislative efforts that enforce restrictions on teaching about topics such as race, gender, American history, and LGBTQ+ identities in K-12 and higher education. PEN America tracks legislation regarding proposed educational gag orders, and this year there has been a 250% increase compared to 2021. The book ban is inexplicably linked to legislation that attempts to suppress teachings about racism, sexism, or bias. For example, in 2022, Republican Florida Governor Ron DeSantis signed the controversial Parental Rights in Education bill that prevents public school teachers from offering instruction about sexual orientation or gender identity in their classroom.
School districts throughout Florida are now required to provide parents with complete information about all health services, library materials, and sex education, and any other program a child utilizes. The legislation also allows parents to challenge any book or instruction material they find offensive. The bill, known as Don't Say Gay, applies to students in kindergarten through 3rd grade, or in any manner that is age appropriate or development appropriate for students in accordance with state standards. The bill is concerning as well as multiple repercussions. Additionally, in October 2022, Republicans introduced a measure to Congress to attempt to pass a national Don't Say Gay law that will prohibit any federal funds from being spent to teach children under 10 about the LGBTQ issues. As we approach the presidential elections in 2024, book bans and supporting legislation are becoming a partisan issue, and many candidates are taking steps to support the freedom to read.
Absolutely. So one of the most important things right now, because folks are using this, in their campaigns already, as we're looking towards Senate and congressional races, and this is a wedge issue for many folks. So as we are approaching, our current election and the future one, on the Unite Against Book Bans website, we have a questionnaire where we can ask our local candidates to complete and give their pledge to sign on and promise their commitment to the freedom to read. This questionnaire and this commitment, I think, is a sign and will be a sign of who shares our values of freedom of speech and the freedom to read. And I've even seen some state library associations ask these questions in candidate debates and share those results on social media. Of course, as public institutions and as nonprofits, we can't do too much lobbying or, take political sides, but what we can do is share information out, as well as our national partners to personalize and send to local newspapers, websites, and magazines that are popular in the community. If they can either respond to a related article or a column recently published in that outlet, or reference local events or activities that have been happening, like a specific book ban at a public library or school in the community, or comments made by a public official, or personal appeals, sharing a personal story that will resonate with readers and others out there.
The ALA is also supportive of libraries experiencing issues from the book bans.
We have one-on-one consultations with library workers who are experiencing book bans, so we can help to point them towards legal resources, financial resources, political resources. We, of course, also have our Unite Against Book Bans campaign, which is for the broader community to be able to help, that has a toolkit for some of the things that we've discussed already. And we also have something called the Merit Fund. And so the Merit Fund supports library workers and individuals who may be experiencing financial hardship because of book banning and book censorship. Of course, as we've discussed, individuals and readers everywhere to stand with us together in the fight against censorship, so that we can empower individuals also to use their voice in the public arena to stop efforts to ban books. I think that one of the greatest strengths that we have is that we are in a democracy. And one of the greatest strengths of that democracy is the ability for folks to make change by using their voice, and to make change by coming up with creative ways to express their voices and to create awareness and promotion. So I think college students in particular are in a really great position to be able to support the freedom to read, because you have access to libraries right on your campus. And your campus needs to know, also your deans and presidents need to know how much you value the work of the library workers on your campus, and how that information, access to that information, has impacted you.
ALA and their many partners in PEN America and other organizations are doing what they can to stop the growing number of book bans. Members of Congress have stepped up to aid their efforts. Congressman Jamie Raskin, who chairs the House, oversees the subcommittee on civil rights and libraries called the Wave of Book Bans, a direct attack on First Amendment rights, and which should alarm every American who believes that freedom of expression is a fundamental pillar of our democracy. In September 2022, Democratic lawmakers in the U.S. House of Representatives and Senate introduced different policies in an attempt to stop the aggressive book ban campaign. It is endorsed by the American Federal Teacher and National Educational Association, labor unions, as well as the literature and education interest groups, and they all call upon local governments to protect the right of students to learn.
To find out more information about how you can support the American Library Association's Unite Against Book Ban, check out the website in the link below. This is Vanessa Treadwell with my co-host Christian Zagal. We want to thank you for listening to this edition of The Right to Read. We would also like to thank Michael Martinus and Heather Wieshlow, who wrote the script and assisted in curating and producing this podcast. We invite you to listen to part 2 of this podcast, where we explore the history of book bans in America, talk with a local Monterey author who had her book banned, and learn about ways that you can support the right to read.